Well, we'll go ahead. It's 24 after, so we'll go ahead and get started. And if they join us, they join us. I'm obviously not Father Casey. Hi. Father Casey is with our youth today, teaching the confirmands about sacraments. And so I am mainly here to facilitate. And I know you've been sharing and learning about pilgrimage. And today is a day for us to share our common stories of pilgrimage. I have been on only one, and I was going to take 3 this year. I was going to go on a civil rights pilgrimage, got postponed again because of COVID. I was going to go to Ireland with the youth, but then I became a deputy for General Convention, so I can't do that. And then I was going to go to Oberammergau, but convention ends the day before the Passion Play. So I've only ever been on one pilgrimage, and I'll just briefly, as we're gathering, say that when I was in seminary, I took a pilgrimage with several seminary students, most of whom had been in the seminary singers, our little choir. And we went to France, primarily to travel to Taizé. So if you've been to one of our Taizé services, you know a little bit about that. We went to the monastery in the south of France where that style of worship originated. And those of us who were under 35 got to stay there for several days. And those of us, myself included, who were not, got to visit for one of those days. And in the meantime, we took a pilgrimage over to Dijon, France. And we did not see mustard made, as that's not exactly, mustard seed faith, I know, but it wasn't really a tie into the pilgrimage. But there is a community there, a monastic community there that some of you may have heard of called L'Arche, L'Arche, the bridge. And it's a community in which those who are living together under monastic orders also welcome into the home and love and care for and support adults with Down syndrome. And they share life together in a monastic way. And it was absolutely beautiful. And then because we were in France, we did see some cathedrals, went to Chartres Cathedral and Notre Dame. And because the theme of it all was singing, we built singing the songs of our faith into all of our stops and journeys. And I'll tell y'all what, there is nothing like standing in an old Gothic style cathedral when no one else is around with a group of people who say, let's sing in here and see what it sounds like. It will take your soul straight up to heaven like nobody's business. So that's enough about me and my journeys. I'm going to apologize in advance that I'm going to sit over here quietly and eat my yogurt, because when you start that eat every 3 hours kind of plan, you have to do it or you pass out. So I understand Jenny is prepared to share something about pilgrimage. You are prepared to share something about pilgrimage. Am I right? Anybody else? Okay, who wants to go first? Jenny, you drew the long straw and you get to go first. So welcome,
right,
Jenny.
okay, I go first.
Okay.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm sorry that yet again I'm not with you in person, but anyway, I wanted to, I have been on pilgrimage to several places. I went to Rome some years ago, and that's a long story, and that was lovely, and met somebody who's become a great friend, and with whom I've been on pilgrimage several times to a place called Walsingham, which is probably a place you've never heard of. It's in what in England we call East Anglia in Norfolk. It's a very small village. Nearly 1,000 years ago, the lady of the manor had a vision of the Virgin Mary holding what she told the lady of the manor, whose name was Richeldis, was a model of the Holy House in Nazareth. And she's asked the Richeldis to build a copy of it there in Walsingham. And so Richeldis didn't know what to do or where to do it, but eventually a spring appeared at her feet, which was later turned into a well. So she decided that this was where she should build this model of the Holy House. And it became a place of great pilgrimage in the Middle Ages. It was second only in England as a place of pilgrimage to the shrine of Thomas à Becket in Canterbury. So many thousands of pilgrims went and miracles were reported, and so its fame grew. But in 1538, the shrine was destroyed along with the abbey as part of the dissolution of the monasteries in England. And so Walsingham fell into obscurity until just about 100 years ago, when the then vicar of the parish of Walsingham, Father Hope Patton, had a new statue of Our Lady of Walsingham carved, because although the original statue had been destroyed at the dissolution, there were pictures of it. And so he had a new statue carved and placed in the parish church. And a few years later, the well was rediscovered, amazingly. And so a new copy, as far as one could tell, of the Holy House was built above and beside it, and a shrine church built over it. And people gradually started coming on pilgrimage. As I say, this was in the 1920s. I've been going on pilgrimage to Walsingham originally with the parish that I worshipped with here in England for the last 25 years. I've been, I suppose, on average at least once a year. And it is a wonderful place. Gradually, as more pilgrims have gone, the cottages around the site have been bought up and turned into pilgrim accommodation. And they surround some beautiful, peaceful gardens, so that you do feel cut off from the world. I mean, apart from the fact that it's in a very obscure part of the country, and one does wonder why that place was selected, but it was, you know. And so the gardens are beautiful and peaceful. Wi-Fi reception is spasmodic, to say the least. So one is cut off in all sorts of ways. And so peace reigns. The most noise you're going to get is probably groups of pilgrims singing verses of hymns as they move between the outdoor stations of the cross. It is a very special place, certainly to me. As I say, I've been, 2 or 3 dozen times, but there are 3 occasions when I can tell you that I have definitely encountered God there. The first occasion must be about 20 years ago now, or over 20 years ago, in fact. What I should tell you was that I was brought up by my mother. I had no knowledge of my father at all. And I got to the age of 50 and we were at Walsingham one day, and in the middle of a service, I burst into tears. And I had no idea why, except that I realized that eventually that I needed to go and ask my mother about my father. She'd been ill. She was in her 80s by this time. So I went along, plucked up the courage, and believe me, it did take some courage, because I knew that it was a taboo subject. And she told me who my father had been. Well, I'd never met him. I knew of he had a son, my half-brother, whom I had vaguely encountered as a small child. But he had a grandson, much my own age, whom I knew for various other reasons that are too complicated to go into. And he lived fairly nearby. And gradually, after my mother died, we re-established contact. And so that was the first sort of encounter with God. And then a few years later, it became apparent that my nephew didn't know that I was actually his aunt, and went back to Walsingham again. And I can tell you that I really bothered God for about 3 days, persistently saying, should I tell him or shouldn't I, And eventually, the night before we left Walsingham, suddenly I decided that if anybody was going to tell my nephew, it should be his father, my half-brother. And I felt this sort of peace come over me. And I went home and I went back to work, as you do, and life carried on. And a week later, my nephew rang me up and said, would you like me to bring you some photos of your father? And I went, pardon? And it transpired that at the moment that more or less the moment that I'd found peace over it, was the moment that God had answered my prayers. And my half brother had told his son about my parentage. You know, that to me is just amazing. So that was two. And then the third one is not so long ago. After my husband died, I went back to Walsingham, and I found myself kneeling in prayer and saying to God, now what in my life? Now where do you want me? And I did feel that sort of connection, if you like, some sort of thing. And I didn't think about it. But again, I went home, I went back to work, you know, carried on with life. And gradually I began to feel that I wasn't finding God in the church where I was worshipping at that time. And I just thought it was me, and it was grief and one thing another. And life carried on, and it didn't get any better. Anyway, in the end, I found myself with you for Holy Week. This was about 6 years ago. And there I did re-find God, which is part of my reason why I am so attached to the fig. And I realized that actually God was, if you like, playing hide and seek and saying, well, I don't want you where you are in this church in England anymore. I want you somewhere else. And eventually I looked around and I found the church where I am now worshipping here in England. And that boosted, and it is the right place. And I knew when I walked into that church that it was the right place for me. So God, I have encountered God in all sorts of ways at Walsingham, and you know, with you know, in answer to prayer. It has been, you know, and really changed my life in many ways, you know. So that's my story.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if you can hear, but you've had a lot of moans of understanding and surprise and joy as you have shared that story. And
I didn't hear, so thank you for telling me.
Yeah. So you have a very active room. It just you drew us right in. It's so amazing how you know, God answers prayers no matter where we are and no matter what we're doing. But sometimes it takes a pilgrimage. It takes a withdrawing from the world to put us in a place where we can hear what God is saying, right? So thank you so much for sharing that story. And I don't know about all of you, but I didn't know that was the tie-in for you spiritually to Transfiguration, and that's nice to know.
Yes, yes.
All right. Well, Emily. And Emily, I don't know what the best way is. Maybe for you to sort of turn sideways so that you can see both Ginny and the group, or do you want to stand?
It's actually Emily and Bill.
Oh, you're both going to talk.
We're both.
Emily and Bill, come on up. I'm so sorry. Come on up. And like if you're standing here, you can kind of see both. You do you, but
Okay. You've got Jesus there? He was important.
Jesus accompanied us to South Africa,
Wow.
and was the first trip that Jesus made with the parish and with pig. So he was always with us.
I'm going to turn this just a bit so Ginny can see Jesus over there in the chair. and Bill. There we go. Okay.
Casey's daughter Isabel was in charge of Jesus. So, anyway, we began the pilgrimage in Cape Town, which is a modern city surrounded by shanty shacks and refugees and all sorts of things. We stayed in a building, and we're going by notes, so we'll keep this concise. We can go in so many different directions. Where they taught refugees job skills during the daytime. On the top floor was a place to stay. It was more like a dormitory. We were literally locked in at night for our safety. Our stay was during the water shortage you may have heard about in Cape Town at that time. Our showers were limited to 90 seconds. Thank goodness for wet wipes. We're not supposed to flush the potties unless it was absolutely necessary. Wow. At dinner, we had there in that facility, a local activist cook for us, making different types of local dishes. We ate dinner. As we ate dinner, he talked to us about justice issues and continuing racial difficulties in South Africa. The food was unique, delicious, mostly. And after dinner, we took turns washing dishes. So this was not a luxury hotel. Each night during the trip, we had a group devotional session and prayer. And we reflected on the day's experiences. And this has brought the group together, plus gave us that prayer sessions. During the days, we followed Nelson Mandela's footsteps and visited sites of racial justice history. We went to prisons where Mandela was incarcerated. One of the prisons was Pollsmoor, a maximum security prison where we went to participate in a restorative justice program. This is a multi-step program to help inmates reconcile and integrate back into society. We went with women inmates who were considering participation in this program. And Jane was very much a part of it. Okay.
We couldn't take anything into the prison. No watches, billfolds, cell phones, which didn't really work that well anyway. Only the clothes we were wearing. We were scanned and taken from one enclosure to the next. Most of us found the experience very intense, perhaps a bit scary. They took us to a large room, and the inmates were seated in a semicircle around the room, at least 20 or more women, and we had about 20 people. The rest of the circle were the chairs for us, so we joined them and completed the circle. The leader of the restorative justice program talked a while. Then some of the women shared their experiences. There was only one white woman among them. She talked about her situation and then tearfully said, "I just want to see my son again." It was quite moving to hear the stories and thoughts of the women. Then we were asked if we had anything to say. After a bit of silence, Sherry Merriman spoke beautifully and said how brave the women were to talk to us and share their stories. At the end of the meeting, we were supposed to all shake hands, which is the South African tradition. Bill and I were sitting pretty close to them, and we started shaking hands. Then one of the women stopped in front of me and said, "Do you need a hug?" I think I had been a little teary at that time. Trying to keep back my tears, I responded, "Sure," and thus began a sharing of hugs around the room. A similar thing occurred on the other side of the room with Sherry also, I think. One would not think a prison could possibly be a thin place, but there was no doubt that God was present there. It was such a beautiful moment of sharing God's love, not only us to them, but from them to us. As we were leaving the room, I saw some of the guards wiping away tears. After this, they took us deeper into the prison complex to see Mandela's cell. It was spacious with a private bath. This was toward the end of his prison time. We had to have masks on to enter the area long before COVID. We passed through the infirmary area to get to his cell. The time spent in Cape Town gave us a new perspective regarding justice. I felt changed by this experience and viewed later events in our own country, like George Floyd, from a different standpoint than I might have before.
The next part of our pilgrimage was a visit to Happy Home School, which our church big has helped to build over the years. It comes from donations from the church and from the parish school. Since the school was established, it has been able to add electricity and water to not only for the school, but for the little town around it. Bear in mind that these are on dirt roads away from any city. We're out in the sticks. This is a preschool which provides care for their children, so mothers are able to work. This in turn helps the community become more prosperous and more vibrant. We went to the school on 3 separate days, one of which was a work day for us. We painted playground equipment, visited with the children, planted beets, and repaired the plumbing. Kip Moravec worked on the plumbing, and they didn't know what a crescent wrench was. Maybe they have one. So we were able to scrounge up some tools to work with. We wanted to buy some tools for it and maybe ship them over. But we were told that they didn't know how to use them, number one. Number two, if you shipped them, they would never get there. They'd be stolen on the way. We also found out we were able to fix the problems with a few simple tools and some of the supplies. Emily was part of the beet planting crew.
Our instructions for the bees were that the tools we needed were around the corner. All that was, Jane's laughing, all that was there was a small 20 by 10 container with 200 blocks of sand with tiny plants in each one. We could not get the individual plants out at first. We tried everything to get the plants out. One of our crew found a big long stick to poke holes in the garden area. Someone else went and got the water bottle to help loosen the little block of dirt and seedlings. A couple of us got down on our hands and knees and planted all the 200 feet seedlings. It wasn't too hard to get down. The school fed us lunch. One of the dishes was mealy, a kind of coarse grit, which was also the main food at the Robben Island prison that we also visited. Mandela was incarcerated there for years at Robben Island. The grits were good, but I wouldn't eat them every meal, which is what the prisoners do. That was their food. Their main food. I think you're right.
Robben Island, I believe, is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, by the way. Anyway, after the school experience, we were able to meet with Archbishop Desmond Tutu at his retirement home. What a special experience that was. When he came into the room, he went around and shook hands with everyone. He expressed so much love. He visited with us for over 30 minutes, longer than we were allowed. We told him of our visit with Happy Homes, which is very near to his heart because he's the one that got us involved in the first place. One last, it's been when, at the end of the program, we went again, shook hands with everyone in the room. This is a nice tradition in South Africa. We're impressed with that. And one last experience, if there's time.
Yes,
We
we have time.
Oh, we're good. One night, we went to Kruger National Park. And there was a small group of us went on a night safari. We were in an open vehicle, the tops were open, you could see well and fresh air, and it was kind of stair step, so everyone could see. Michael Merriman pointed out the Southern Cross constellation to us in the night sky. We had the driver stop and turn off the lights so we could see it. Father Casey's daughter Isabel started singing, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," from the hymn. This was a moment. We all joined her. And what a joy to sing those alleluias at the end of that song. I hope the animals enjoyed our singing as much as we did.
I wonder if that was when the huge elephant came down the road. Do you think it was? Remember that? Yeah, the safari driver had a difficult time trying to encourage the elephant to not come kick us. We met many South Africans along our pilgrimage, none of which looked like us. They were so gracious, welcoming, and it felt so comfortable being with them. How important it is to seek Christ in all persons. That was a lesson reinforced on this trip.
Another part of the.
You're
experience-
fine, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, keep talking. Yeah, you got a seat, having your hand.
Another part of the trip was to present the school with a $10,000 check to help them build a new nursery. Now, several of the buildings were built there because of the generosity over the years of the school and the faith. Let's see. There was a celebration when we gave them the check, and they believe in long speeches, by the way. But anyway, a local choir sang for us. And we have a recording, and we have some recording that you might like to hear.
Are we okay, John?
We are okay. I'm gonna ask you to turn it up real loud, and if you'll stand close to the computer over there, I'm hoping Jenny will be able to hear it.
They've got the clicking sound of the roof. I can see it that way.
Oh, yeah. You know,
That's great.
thank you.
Just a sideline to that trilling noise, which is very much a joyful part of the singing, was illegal during apartheid. It was too nationalist. And Jay, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about restorative justice, or we're.
We've got just a few more minutes, Jane. Would you be willing to talk a little?
Oh, well, okay.
we're putting you on
You're
the
not
spot.
shy.
When we were at the prison, we were also moved by those women. And John, I think it was a husband and wife that were running this program. And we wanted to get involved too, because we had bonded with those women so closely. And it was a program where they would sit down with the parents of whomever they had offended, who was usually dead, and they would work it out so that there was forgiveness all the way around. And this couple had studied this procedure, and it was determined that this forgiveness was way more effective in their life changing its pattern than the incarceration. Everyone that was at that prison was just amazing. And John was absolutely on fire with this, his enthusiasm for this program he wanted to start, or they had started, and for whatever we could do. And we did all write cards once we were home, put it all together and got it over there, which takes 6 months or so. but to let those women know that we were there for them. And at the end, which was so tearful and happy, they, well, let me back up a bit. When we were talking with John, that before we even went into the prison area, we hadn't planned to go back there. That wasn't on the agenda. But then the more he spoke with us, he just, it was a God thing. He just led us along this path, and we went, and all that the prison agreed. We went through the corridors in the prison and saw the inmates. Then we went in, they were in the room. And so while that wasn't planned, the women there equated us with angels. They thought we were their angels that came to offer this. And it's voluntary to be in the program that he was offering. And, you know, sometimes 2 or 3 maybe, or 5. But in this case, I think the entire group wanted to pursue this program and take the steps that were hard work, really hard work, to get to the point where they met with those they had offended.
And the church funded that group.
We did.
There were fees involved, the cost of food and so forth.
And that was not planned. We had not allotted money for that. We just did it.
God meets you on pilgrimage and your pocketbook. Yeah.
So it was, extremely moving, affirming, and our bond of those of us that were on the trip was, we were just one group. We were
Our group sessions at the end of the day were just so uplifting and so revealing of our experience and to be able to stand there.
Yeah. Awesome.
I hadn't even thought of it as a pilgrimage until Father Casey started talking about it. I thought, well, all those elements were there.
Yeah.
I never thought of it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all very much. I wonder if anyone who's here has questions for anybody who's presented today, or final thoughts or reflections. Let's see if I try to get the whole room in the screen. I can almost get you. Yeah, I can't get everybody unless I move back. This is our last class together as a group, reflecting on pilgrimage. I wonder if anybody, well, I don't know. I know you 3 have been on pilgrimage. I know Jenny has. Have y'all been on a pilgrimage ever?
Aspiring pilgrims.
Aspiring. Where are you aspiring? Do you have a specific pilgrimage
Like
in
go to
mind?
Ireland, or the place in England that Jenny spoke of sounded really magical.
Oh, yeah.
Ireland or Scotland.
There are, sorry, I was just going to say, because there are other places in England, you know, where I have unexpectedly encountered God, not when I've been on pilgrimage, but I have sort of, you know, one of my, sorry, have I got a moment, Mother Rebecca?
A brief one, yes.
Yeah, one of my goddaughters was married about 20 years ago in a place called Hexham Abbey, which is up in Northumberland. And it's a medieval church. It's a church that survived because it was a parish church, so it wasn't destroyed entirely at the dissolution of the monasteries. But because my goddaughter's husband-to-be was involved with that church, we were invited on the evening before the wedding to go down into the crypt. Now, the church is just a medieval church, which may sound amazing to you, but in England, you know, it's another medieval church. But we went down into the crypt. The crypt was part of the church that was founded by St. Wilfrid. It is made of stones, robbed, if you like, from the buildings on Hadrian's Wall. So they are Roman stones, still with Latin inscriptions in them. Very tiny place, a bit like going into the catacombs. And as I went down into that crypt, I can only say to you that the centuries fell away in the most amazing way that I can't describe in any other way. but it was just one of those most unexpected encounters with God and with church history.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I will say, because those medieval churches are not a luxury that we have the opportunity to wander through.
Sorry.
No, it's a perfect segue. One of the most powerful aspects of the pilgrimage that I made throughout churches in France, and that I have adopted in a lot of travel when we go to an old holy site. It started in Notre Dame, and then we moved over to Chartres, which is also quite ancient. And one of the guides who was showing us around and helping us understand some of what we were seeing said to place your hand on the wall of the building while standing quietly inside. And he said that the prayers of saints for hundreds of years reverberate in these walls. So if you're ever in one of those ancient holy sites, even if it's standing for the most part in ruins, and you can put your hand on it's almost always stone. If you could put your hand on that stone and close your eyes, especially if you can get an opportunity where it's just quiet in the church, there is a pulsing energy that you will feel move through your body. And it's one of the closest times I've ever come to just knowing that I was in the presence of the Holy Spirit. And it'll take the breath away. And there are lots and lots and lots of places where people have been praying for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and you can connect into that. So I'll leave you with that little offering. And let me say, you don't have to be in a medieval place to do that, right? Anywhere where prayers have been offered over and over. Come into this building, into our nave sometime when it's quiet, and stand in silence and place your hand on the brick wall. And you'll feel that same energy and life-giving power of years and years and years of prayer lifted up before you. Remember that really everywhere we go, every square inch of this incredible earth was created by God and can be sacramental to us, in that it can be an outward and visible sign of God's love and goodness toward us wherever we go. And so as you're aspiring to make a pilgrimage, as you await your next pilgrimage, just remember that all the earth is holy ground. And if you'll walk on it that way, you can be a pilgrim everywhere. Okay? God bless you. Thank you so much. Thanks for letting me crash your class. And we'll all give Father Casey a great hand for teaching an excellent class. And thank you so much to our pilgrims who shared today. We really loved that. God bless you, Jenny.
Thank you, Mother Rebecca. Bye.
Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.